I should have noticed the signs earlier. The way my mother smiled too brightly when my sister Rebecca visited the office. How the corporate credit card was suddenly available whenever Rebecca needed business clothes. How my accomplishments were always framed as our family success, while my failures remained solely mine. But nothing prepared me for that rainy Tuesday when, after growing our small family candle shop into an $80 million empire with distribution in 43 countries, my mother called me into the conference room. "Alexandra," she said, her voice oddly formal. "You've done wonderful things for Luminous Legacy, but it's time for a change. Rebecca will be taking over as CEO effective next month. We need fresh ideas." As I sat there, utterly stunned, watching my sister smirk from across the polished mahogany table I'd personally selected last year, I realized 16 years of sacrifice, innovation, and loyalty meant nothing compared to the accident of birth order. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in the coastal town of Harborview, Massachusetts, I was always the practical one. Our family home above the small candle shop my mother operated smelled perpetually of beeswax, lavender, and ambition. My father had left when I was 8 and Rebecca was 5, leaving my mother, Ellen Winters, to manage both the struggling business and 2 young daughters on her own. "Alexandra, could you watch Rebecca while I finish this custom order?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. By 12, I wasn't just watching my sister. I was helping with inventory, learning to operate the cash register, and staying up late to help my mother hand-dip limited edition holiday collections. "You're my rock, Alex," Mom would say, tucking my hair behind my ear with hands perpetually stained with dye and scented oils. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Rebecca, meanwhile, preferred to spend her time at friends' houses or practicing for school plays. She had our father's charisma and flair for the dramatic, while I inherited my mother's focus and determination. It wasn't that Rebecca didn't care about the business. She simply assumed it would always be there, like the lighthouse that stood sentinel over our town. I was 17 when I made my first significant contribution to Luminous Legacy candles. After overhearing tourists complain about wanting something to commemorate their visit to Harborview, I stayed up 3 nights straight developing our Coastal Memories line, candles embedded with small seashells and scented like ocean breeze, each in hand-painted jars featuring local landmarks. "These will never sell," my mother worried. "The materials alone cost twice as much as our regular inventory." "Trust me," I insisted. "People don't want just candles. They want to take home a piece of their vacation." She reluctantly agreed to produce a small batch. They sold out in 2 days. By the end of that summer, we had doubled our revenue and hired our first additional employee. I delayed college for a year to help establish the new line, and then another when a small gift shop in a neighboring town requested wholesale pricing. Before I knew it, I was 22 with no degree, but with an increasingly clear vision for what Luminous Legacy could become. "Go to college, Alexandra," my mother would periodically insist. This was never meant to be your whole life, but it already was. I saw potential where others saw just a small-town candle shop. During those early years, I slept on a cot in the back storage room more often than in my own bed. I taught myself accounting, negotiated our first significant loan for equipment upgrades, and cold-called gift shops across New England until our wholesale business rivaled our retail sales. Rebecca graduated with a marketing degree from NYU and took a job with a trendy advertising agency in Manhattan. She visited on holidays, bringing expensive gifts and stories about celebrity clients, while I worked 80-hour weeks expanding our production capacity. "It's not fair that you're stuck in this town while Rebecca gets to have a glamorous life," Mom said once, her face creased with guilt. "I'm not stuck," I told her truthfully. "I'm building something." The turning point came when I was 26. A buyer from a national home goods chain visited our shop while vacationing in Harborview. Impressed by our products and packaging, She invited us to participate in a small business spotlight program in 12 of their stores. I stayed up all night preparing a presentation that showcased not just our existing lines, but my vision for exclusive collections we could develop for their customer base. 2 weeks later, we had our first national purchase order, larger than our entire previous year's revenue. "We can't possibly fulfill this," Mom panicked, pacing our small office. "We'd need triple the staff, more equipment, a larger production space." "Then that's what we'll get," I said simply, already making lists and running numbers in my head. We secured a loan against the property to lease a small warehouse on the edge of town. I hired and trained 15 new employees, mostly local women who needed flexible hours around childcare. We revamped our production methods while maintaining the handcrafted quality that had become our signature. The night before our first major shipment, disaster struck. One of the new mixing machines malfunctioned, ruining an entire batch of our best-selling lavender collection. We were already on a tight deadline, and this would put us irreparably behind. I called everyone in. We worked 24 hours straight, hand mixing and pouring, all of us exhausted but determined. My mother, despite her arthritis, worked alongside. Everyone else, her efficiency putting younger staff to shame. When the delivery truck pulled away the following evening with our complete order, right on schedule, Mom hugged me tightly. "You made this happen, Alexandra," she whispered. "This business would have stayed a little shop forever without you." It was the validation I'd been seeking without realizing it. That night, as I finally collapsed into bed in my small apartment, above what was now our retail-only storefront, the original shop space having been converted to offices, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were on the cusp of something much bigger. The National Chain Spotlight program exceeded everyone's expectations. Our exclusive Heritage Collection, featuring scents inspired by American historical periods, resonated with their customers. What was meant to be a one-time feature evolved into permanent placement in 30 stores, then 60, then nationwide. Rebecca called from New York when she saw our display in Manhattan. "Oh my God, Alex, this is massive. Mom must be over the moon." "We're all pretty excited," I said, not mentioning the 18-hour days, the constant pressure of scaling production, or how I'd remortgaged my condo to help finance our expansion. When one of our loans was unexpectedly denied. "Maybe I should come work with you guys now that you're hitting the big time," she laughed. I laughed too, taking it as a joke. Little did I know that conversation would come back to haunt me years later when everything I'd built was suddenly at stake. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. The next 5 years were a blur of expansion, challenges, and 18-hour workdays. What had started as a small-town candle shop was rapidly transforming into a serious player in the home fragrance industry. By my 30th birthday, Luminous Legacy had 3 production facilities, over 100 employees, and distribution to major retailers across the country. My mother, now in her 60s, had stepped back from day-to-day operations but remained the company's public face, the warm, creative founder whose kitchen experiments had launched the brand. I was the engine behind the scenes, negotiating contracts, overseeing production, and constantly innovating our product lines. "Alexandra needs to be recognized more," my mother would tell journalists during interviews. "She's the real visionary here." But somehow those quotes rarely made it into the final articles. The narrative of the plucky widow who built a multi-million dollar business from her kitchen was simply too appealing to editors. I didn't mind. Not really. Recognition had never been my driving force. I measured success in growth percentages, employee retention rates, and expansion opportunities. And by those metrics, we were thriving beyond my wildest dreams. Our breakthrough into international markets came unexpectedly, through a chance meeting at a trade show in Chicago. A British department store executive approached our booth, intrigued by our seasonal transitions collection, candles designed to gradually shift scents as they burned, moving from summer to fall or winter to spring. "We've never seen anything like this," she said, examining the layered wax formations. "Would you consider an exclusive partnership for the UK market?" 3 months and countless negotiation calls later, Luminous Legacy products appeared in high-end department stores across London. The British press loved our story, particularly the mother-daughter angle, and sales exceeded projections by 200%. Success brought complications I hadn't anticipated. Copycats emerged, attempting to duplicate our signature techniques. A large conglomerate offered to buy us out for a sum that would have set my mother and me up for life. Venture capitalists circled, promising exponential growth in exchange for equity and a seat at the decision-making table. I turned them all down, despite pressure from our newly formed board of advisors. "We're not selling out," I told my mother, after a particularly tense meeting where our financial advisor had strongly recommended accepting the conglomerate's offer. "This is our legacy. Your legacy." "It's your legacy too, Alexandra," she replied, squeezing my hand. "More yours than mine now, if I'm being honest." That conversation gave me the confidence to push forward with my most ambitious plan yet: vertical integration. Instead of relying on suppliers for our raw materials, we would produce our own. I located a struggling organic beeswax farm in Vermont and a family-owned botanical oil distillery in upstate New York, both on the verge of closing due to financial pressures. "You want to buy farms now?" my mother asked, concerned when I presented the proposal. "Isn't that overextending ourselves?" "It's securing our supply chain," I explained, "and preserving traditional craftsmanship that's disappearing. Plus, think of the marketing potential: fully integrated, ethically sourced ingredients with complete transparency from hive to home." The acquisitions stretched our finances dangerously thin. I stopped taking a salary for 8 months to make the numbers work. My small apartment remained unfurnished except for a bed and a desk. I canceled my health insurance temporarily, crossing my fingers that nothing would happen while we weathered the financial strain. Those sacrifices paid off. Our fully integrated farm-to-flame campaign resonated deeply with conscious consumers. Luxury retailers who had previously considered us too commercial suddenly wanted exclusive collections. Our price point could now justify premium positioning, and profit margins improved despite the initial investment. Throughout this whirlwind of growth, Rebecca remained in New York, climbing the ranks at her advertising agency. She had recently been promoted to creative director, working with several fashion and beauty brands. Our interactions were limited to holiday gatherings and occasional phone calls where she'd marvel at the company's expansion. "I saw your candles at Bergdorf's last week," she mentioned during one call. "Displayed right next to Joe Malone and Diptyque. That's major, Alex." "We're holding our own," I replied, understating the fact that our holiday collection had outsold both those premium brands the previous quarter. "Mom must be thrilled. It's incredible what you two have built together." There was something in her tone I couldn't quite place. Admiration? Yes. But something else too. A hint of wistfulness, perhaps. Or calculation. I dismissed the thought immediately, attributing it to my own exhaustion and paranoia from too many consecutive 16-hour days. The day everything changed began ordinarily enough. I was reviewing the prototypes for our new hotel amenities line, a partnership with a luxury hotel chain that could potentially double our annual revenue, when my assistant informed me that my mother needed to see me in the main conference room immediately. Assuming it was about the hotel deal, I grabbed my tablet and hurried upstairs. When I walked in, I was surprised to see not just my mother, but our entire executive team seated around the table. And in my mother's right hand sat Rebecca, dressed in a sleek designer suit I'd never seen before. "Alexandra, perfect timing," my mother said, her voice carrying an unfamiliar formality. I sat down slowly, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach as I took in the scene. Our CFO, Thomas, wouldn't meet my eyes. Our HR director, Marianne, was clutching her pen too tightly. And Rebecca? Rebecca was practically glowing with barely contained excitement. As you know, my mother continued, Luminous Legacy has reached a critical juncture. We're poised for unprecedented international expansion, and our brand identity is evolving rapidly. I nodded cautiously. These were all points from my 5-year strategic plan, which I'd presented to the board just last month. The board and I have been discussing leadership succession, she continued. I'm not getting any younger, and we need to ensure stability for our investors and employees moving forward. My pulse quickened. Was this it? After 16 years of building this business from a small shop to an international brand, was my mother finally ready to formalize my position as CEO? I'd been functioning in the role unofficially for years, but we'd never made it official. We believe fresh leadership with a contemporary marketing perspective is exactly what Luminous Legacy needs for this next chapter, my mother said, her voice oddly rehearsed. That's why I'm pleased to announce that Rebecca will be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer, effective next month. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Surely I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? The words escaped before I could stop them. My mother's smile tightened. Rebecca's experience in brand management and corporate leadership at Morgan & Pierce Advertising makes her uniquely qualified to guide Luminous Legacy through its next growth phase. The board voted unanimously this morning. I looked around the table at the executive team I'd personally hired over the years. None of them would meet my gaze. The board voted, without consulting me. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. I'm the COO. I built this company. We built this company, my mother corrected, her tone sharpening. And as majority shareholder, I have to make decisions based on what's best for Luminous Legacy's future, not individual preferences. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice dripping with rehearsed compassion. Alex, I know this must be a shock, but I've been preparing for this transition for months. I've developed a comprehensive rebranding strategy that will elevate Luminous Legacy to compete directly with luxury European brands. Months, I echoed, the betrayal cutting deeper. You've been planning this for months without telling me? Thomas, our CFO, cleared his throat. Alexandra, you'll retain your position as Chief Operating Officer. Your operational expertise is still invaluable to the company. A demotion. They were demoting me to report to my younger sister, who had never spent a single day working in our business? This is absurd, I said, struggling to maintain my composure. Rebecca has zero experience in manufacturing, supply chain management, or product development. She's never even worked a day in this company. But I understand branding and luxury positioning, Rebecca interjected smoothly. Luminous Legacy has plateaued with its current market strategy. We need to elevate. Plateaued? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We grew 43% last year in the middle of an economic downturn. We're about to launch a hotel partnership that will potentially double our revenue. What exactly are you talking about? My mother intervened, her tone suddenly cold. Alexandra, I understand you're upset, but this decision is final. Rebecca has a vision for Luminous Legacy that aligns perfectly with where the market is headed. I turned to look directly at my sister. And what exactly is your vision, Rebecca? Since you've apparently been developing it for months, she smiled, pulling a sleek presentation folder from her designer bag. I'm glad you asked. I've prepared a complete overview of my strategy. For the next 20 minutes, I sat in stunned silence as my sister outlined her plans for Luminous Legacy, plans that involved scrapping our vertically integrated supply chain, too costly, abandoning our mid-market retail partnerships, dilutes the brand, and relocating headquarters to New York City, essential for attracting top talent. Everything I'd built, everything that made Luminous Legacy special, she planned to dismantle. This isn't a strategy, I finally interrupted. This is destruction. You'll alienate our core customers, lose the craftsmanship that differentiates us, and triple our overhead costs with a New York office. It's corporate suicide. Rebecca's smile didn't waver. The board disagrees, Alex. Sometimes an outsider's perspective is exactly what a family business needs to reach the next level. An outsider. After 16 years of pouring my heart, soul, and financial security into this company, I was now the outsider. I turned to my mother. Mom, you can't seriously think this is the right direction. Everything that makes us successful, our community connections, our authentic production methods, our accessible luxury positioning, she wants to replace with generic luxury branding. For just a moment, something flickered in my mother's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or regret. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the stubborn determination I'd inherited from her. Rebecca has proven herself in the corporate world, Alexandra. Her agency handles accounts worth 10 times our annual revenue. Sometimes we need to trust expertise over sentiment. Sentiment. That's what she thought this was. Some emotional attachment to the way things had always been done. Not the hard-won business wisdom that had grown our company from nothing to $80 million. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need some air and time to process this. Betrayal. Alexandra, my mother called as I headed for the door. Don't be dramatic. This is business, not betrayal. I paused at the threshold. 16 years, Mom. 16 years of 18-hour days, of remortgaging my home to make payroll when we were expanding, of missing friends' weddings and holidays to handle production emergencies. I gave this company everything while Rebecca was building her career elsewhere. And now you hand it to her like a graduation present. What would you call it? I didn't wait for her answer. Outside, the crisp autumn air did nothing to cool the burning humiliation and rage coursing through me. I walked blindly through the corporate campus I had designed, past the test gardens where we grew botanical ingredients, past the visitor center that welcomed tour groups and school children, past the employee daycare facility I'd fought to include in our last expansion. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. Messages from concerned executives who had witnessed the ambush, I assumed. I ignored them all, continuing to walk until I found myself at the small original storefront, where everything had begun. It had been preserved largely as a company museum, a testament to our humble beginnings. Through the window, I could see the old wooden counter where I'd first learned to operate a cash register, the wall of shelves my teenage self had stained and installed, the faded sign in my mother's handwriting, Luminous Legacy Candles, brightening homes since 1992. The irony wasn't lost on me. Legacy. What exactly was my legacy now? As I stood there, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Please come back so we can discuss your role in the transition. Rebecca needs your institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge. Was that all I was now? A repository of information to be mined and then discarded? I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I hadn't done since I was 17. I got in my car and drove to Lighthouse Point, the rocky outcropping where I used to go when life felt overwhelming. I needed perspective. I needed a plan. Because one thing was crystal clear. I might have lost the battle today, but I wasn't about to surrender the war. The lighthouse stood sentinel against the darkening sky, its beam sweeping across the churning Atlantic waters. I sat on the same weathered bench where I'd sketched my first candle designs all those years ago, watching fishing boats return to harbor as the wind whipped my hair into knots. My phone had finally stopped buzzing. 27 missed calls from my mother, Rebecca, our executive team, even our company attorney. I ignored them all. They'd made their decision without consulting me. I would make mine without consulting them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I forced myself to think strategically rather than emotionally. What were my options? I could accept my demotion, swallow my pride, and work under Rebecca. Watching her dismantle everything I'd built while pretending to support her vision. Unthinkable. I could resign immediately, walk away from Luminous Legacy entirely. But what then? Start over at 41 with no college degree? The thought made my stomach clench. Besides, walking away felt like conceding that I hadn't earned my place, that 16 years of sacrifices counted for nothing. I could fight, challenge the board's decision legally. As a minority shareholder with 18% equity, I had some rights. But my mother held 52%, and the remaining 30% was split among our advisory board and early investors. It would be an uphill battle at best, a humiliating and expensive defeat at worst. Knew I'd find you here. The voice startled me. I turned to see Diane Mercer, my first hire from 17 years ago, now our production director, climbing carefully over the rocks toward my bench. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in her signature practical bun, her hands showing the same permanent stains from working with dyes and oils that my mother's had always carried. "How'd you know?" I asked as she settled beside me on the bench. Where else would Alexandra Winters go to regroup after having her life's work handed to her baby sister? She shook her head. "It's unbelievable, Alex. Just unbelievable." "You knew about the meeting?" "No one in operations knew. From what I can gather, your mother and Rebecca worked directly with the board. Thomas and Marianne were only informed yesterday, sworn to secrecy." She hesitated. "For what it's worth, there are a lot of concerned people at headquarters right now." I stared out at the darkening ocean. Concerned for the company or concerned for their jobs? Both. Nobody believes Rebecca has the first idea how to run our operations. Everyone's wondering if this is the beginning of the end. There are already rumors about relocating to New York. Not rumors. It's part of her grand strategy. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Diane was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What could I do? "I haven't decided yet," I admitted. She nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Well, when you do decide, you should know that operations are behind you. Every department head, every line supervisor, every quality control specialist, we all know who built this company. Who really understands it?" Her words warmed something that had gone cold inside me. I wasn't alone. Not completely. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means more than you know." After Diane left, I remained on the bench until the stars emerged, thinking about what she'd said. The operations team, the heart of our business, stood with me. That wasn't nothing. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Sam Thorne, my oldest friend and our company's head legal counsel. Unlike the others, I picked up. "They can't just ambush you like this, Alex," he said without preamble. "There are procedures, protocols." "But my mother has majority control," I interrupted. "Yes, but..." He hesitated. "Look, I can't officially advise you as company counsel. There's a conflict of interest. But as your friend, this stinks, and you have more leverage than you might think." "I'm listening." "First, your employment contract. If they want to change your role or reporting structure, they need your consent or they have to fire you for cause. And there is absolutely no cause." "I hadn't even thought about my contract," Sam continued. "Second, your intellectual property rights. Many of your product innovations were created before the company had its current structure. The seasonal transitions, technology, the embedded botanicals process, even the original Coastal Memories line. You developed those. Did you ever formally transfer those patents and trademarks to the company?" My mind raced. Some yes, some no. It was pretty informal in the early days. Exactly. That's leverage. Third, your relationships with suppliers and key accounts. Those are personal relationships built on trust. If you left, they might follow. I finished his thought. Many would, I suspect. And finally, there's your reputation in the industry. Rebecca might have advertising connections, but you're respected in manufacturing, retail, and product development circles. That matters. For the first time since the ambush, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't powerless. What would you do? If you were me, I asked. I'd take time to consider my position carefully. I wouldn't make any rash decisions or statements. And I definitely wouldn't resign without negotiating exit terms that recognize your contributions and protect your interests. He paused. And Alex? I'd document everything from this point forward. After we hung up, I sat for another hour, processing. By the time I drove back to my modest townhouse, the same one I'd bought 12 years ago despite having the means for something much grander, I had the outlines of a plan. I wouldn't resign. Not immediately. I'd return to the office tomorrow, request formal documentation of the leadership change, and begin quietly assessing my actual leverage within the company I'd built. Knowledge was power, and despite what my mother and sister might think, nobody knew Luminous Legacy better than I did. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying the boardroom scene in my mind, thinking of all the things I should have said. Around 3 a.m., I got up and pulled out the company scrapbooks I'd meticulously maintained over the years. There I was at 22, standing proudly in front of our first warehouse. There was the newspaper clipping about our first national retail partnership, quoting me as the driving force behind the company's expansion. Photos from our 10th anniversary celebration, the ribbon cutting at our second production facility, the Industry Innovation Award I'd accepted in Chicago. 16 years of my life, documented in newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes. 16 years of building something from nothing, of weathering economic downturns and supply chain crises, of knowing our employees' children by name and attending their high school graduations. Had I been naive to think that my contributions would be valued? That blood and sweat equity would count as much as a marketing degree from NYU and connections in the New York advertising world? Dawn was breaking when I finally made a decision. I would fight, not with angry confrontations or legal threats, but with strategic precision. If Rebecca wanted to run Luminous Legacy, she would first have to understand what she was trying to control. And nobody understood this business like I did. I showered, dressed in my most authoritative suit, and headed for the office. Game on, little sister. Game on. The headquarters parking lot was unusually full for 7:30 a.m. News travels fast in a company town like Harborview. As I walked through the employee entrance, conversations hushed and concerned glances followed me down the corridor. I kept my head high, my expression neutral. "Alexandra!" My assistant Jenny jumped up from her desk as I approached. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She'd been crying. "I didn't know if you'd be in today. I'm so sorry." I had no idea that meeting was going to— "It's fine, Jenny," I interrupted, not wanting to discuss it in the corridor. "Just a standard leadership transition. Nothing to worry about." She looked unconvinced but nodded. "Your mother has called 4 times this morning. She's requested you join her in her office as soon as you arrive." Of course she had. "Tell her I'll be available after I've reviewed my emails and calendar for the day." Small acts of resistance. Small reminders that while they might have blindsided me yesterday, today I was back in control of my actions, if nothing else. As I settled at my desk, a notification popped up on my computer. A company-wide email from my mother announcing Rebecca's appointment as CEO. The message praised her innovative vision and fresh perspective, while thanking me for my operational contributions and expressing excitement about my continued role in day-to-day management. The sanitized corporate language made my blood boil. 16 years reduced to operational contributions. But I forced myself to breathe deeply. Emotional reactions wouldn't serve me now. I spent the morning methodically documenting my ongoing projects, especially the hotel partnership that stood to transform our business model. If Rebecca wanted to dismantle this deal, she'd have to understand exactly what she was walking away from. At precisely 11:30 a.m., I finally made my way to my mother's office. Let her wait, a small reminder that I wasn't at her beck and call. Her assistant waved me through immediately. Inside, I found my mother alone, looking uncharacteristically anxious. She stood when I entered, reaching for a hug that I smoothly sidestepped. "Alexandra," she began, her tone conciliatory. "I know yesterday was difficult." "Difficulty doesn't begin to cover it," I interrupted, keeping my voice level. "But I'm not here to discuss feelings. I need to understand exactly what my role will be moving forward, in writing, before Rebecca takes control." My mother's expression tightened at my businesslike tone. "You're still COO, Alexandra. That hasn't changed. But my reporting structure has, my authority has, my ability to make strategic decisions has. Those are material changes to my employment conditions." "This is still our family business," she countered. "We don't need to be so formal." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because yesterday's ambush in the boardroom felt exceedingly formal. So did this morning's company-wide announcement that reduced 16 years of building this company to operational contributions." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That wasn't my wording. Rebecca worked with the PR team, and that's precisely my point. Decisions affecting my position are already being made without my input. So yes, I need everything in writing. My responsibilities, my authority, my compensation, my targets. Everything." My mother sank back into her chair. "When did you become so cold, Alexandra? This isn't like you." "Cold?" I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped me. "I'm being professional. Something you might have considered before handing the company I built to my sister without so much as a conversation. I've always appreciated your contributions." "Contributions?" I leaned forward. "Mom, I devoted my entire adult life to growing Luminous Legacy. I missed college, relationships, starting my own family, all because this company came first. Always. I remortgaged my home 3 times to fund expansions. I worked 100-hour weeks for years. These aren't contributions. This is my life's work." For a moment, something like regret flickered across her face. "I never asked you to sacrifice everything, Alexandra. No, you just expected it." Silence stretched between us, filled with decades of unspoken expectations, assumptions, and now, betrayal. Finally, she sighed. "What do you want, Alexandra?" "I told you. Documentation of my role, authority, and compensation moving forward. And I want to be present for Rebecca's onboarding. Every meeting, every decision, every strategy session." She frowned. "That seems excessive. Rebecca needs space to establish her leadership." "Rebecca knows nothing about our business," I cut in. "Nothing about our production methods, our supplier relationships, our customer acquisition costs, our inventory management systems. If she wants to succeed, if you want her to succeed, she needs my knowledge, and I need to ensure she doesn't dismantle what we've built through ignorance." My mother studied with me for a long time. "You're not planning to sabotage her, are you?" The question stung, revealing how little she trusted me despite everything I'd sacrificed. "Unlike some people in this room, I actually care about the future of Luminous Legacy. I built this company, Mom. I'm not going to destroy it out of spite." Not quite a lie, but not quite the truth either. I wouldn't sabotage the company, but I certainly planned to make Rebecca earn every inch of the authority she'd been handed. "Fine." My mother finally conceded. "I'll have HR draft a formal outline of your role, and you can attend Rebecca's onboarding meetings. She arrives next Monday to begin the transition." I nodded and stood to leave. "Alexandra," she called as I reached the door. "I hope someday you'll understand. This wasn't personal. I turned back, meeting her eyes. It was never business for me, Mom. That's the difference between us. It was always personal. The remainder of the week passed in a flurry of activity. I met with each department head individually, solidifying my relationships and implicitly securing their loyalty. I documented every project, every process, every client relationship, not for Rebecca's benefit, but to cement my indispensability. Most crucially, I had dinner with Cameron Reynolds, the CEO of Walderton Hotels, our potential partner for the hotel amenities line. "I was surprised to get your call," he admitted as we settled into a quiet corner of Harborview's best restaurant. "I thought we were meeting next month with your full team." "Plans change," I said simply. I wanted to touch base personally before some upcoming leadership transitions at Luminous Legacy. His eyebrows rose. "Leadership transitions? You're not leaving, are you, Alexandra? Our board approved this partnership largely based on your track record." This was exactly the opening I needed. "Not leaving," I clarified. "But my sister is joining as CEO, bringing her marketing expertise from New York." I watched his expression carefully as I continued. "She may have some different ideas about strategic direction, so I wanted to ensure we were aligned on the value of our partnership before she begins her review of all ongoing projects." Cameron frowned. "Different ideas?" "Alexandra, we've invested considerable resources in preliminary work for this rollout. The exclusivity agreement alone is still very much on track from my perspective," I assured him smoothly. "I just can't speak for our incoming CEO yet, which is precisely why I wanted this conversation." By the time dessert arrived, I had accomplished my goal. Cameron was thoroughly concerned about Rebecca potentially derailing our partnership and had promised to express his concerns directly to our board of directors if any changes to our agreement were proposed. One piece of leverage secured. The weekend before Rebecca's arrival, I made one more strategic move. I invited our 3 largest retail partners to an informal dinner at my home, something I did periodically to maintain our relationships. As we enjoyed drinks on my deck overlooking the harbor, I casually mentioned the upcoming leadership change. "Rebecca brings valuable marketing experience," I said carefully, "though she'll have a learning curve on production and fulfillment matters." Victoria Chen, buyer for our largest retail partner, set down her glass. "Wait, you're stepping back? But you're—" "The reason we partnered with Luminous Legacy, your quality control systems, your production transparency, your reliability during supply chain crunches. That's why we feature your products prominently." "I'm not stepping back entirely," I assured her. "Just reporting to our new CEO, my sister." "Your sister?" echoed James Harford from Meridian Home Stores. "The one who works in advertising in New York? The one who's never manufactured a product in her life?" I merely smiled, letting their concerns simmer without adding fuel to the fire. By evening's end, all 3 had made me promise to personally handle their accounts during the transition, expressing thinly veiled worries about potential changes to our business practices. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Rebecca's grand entrance was scheduled for 10 a.m., a town hall introduction to the full staff. I arrived at 6:30 as usual, wanting to center myself before the performance began. At 9:45, I made my way to the event space, our largest conference, room rearranged with chairs theater style. My mother stood at the front, nervously rearranging the welcome flowers. No sign of Rebecca yet. "Everything looks lovely," I commented, my tone professionally detached. "Where's our new CEO?" "She's running a few minutes behind," my mother replied, checking her watch. "Traffic from the airport." "Of course." Already demonstrating her commitment to the company by being late to her own introduction. I took a seat in the front row, directly in Rebecca's line of sight, and waited as employees filed in, many stopping to squeeze my shoulder or offer sympathetic glances. At 10:17, 17 minutes late, Rebecca finally swept into the room like a celebrity arriving at a premiere. She wore a cream designer suit that probably cost more than what most of our production staff earned in a month. Her dark hair styled in an elegant updo that contrasted sharply with my practical ponytail. The room fell silent as she made her way to the front, air-kissing our mother's cheek before turning to face the assembled employees. Her smile was dazzling, practiced, the smile of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Good morning, Luminous." "Legacy family," she began, her voice carrying the polished cadence of someone who'd taken public speaking courses. "I can't tell you how thrilled I am to join this incredible company that my mother and sister have built." For the next 20 minutes, Rebecca delivered what I had to admit was an impressive speech. She highlighted the company's journey, though conspicuously minimizing my role, painted a vision of Luminous Legacy as a global luxury brand, conveniently ignoring the core mid-market customer base that had built our success, and promised exciting changes that would elevate every aspect of our business, without specifying any actual concrete plans. It was all sparkle, no substance. But the sad truth was, most people couldn't tell the difference. Several board members nodded along enthusiastically. Even some department heads looked cautiously optimistic. And of course, Rebecca concluded, her gaze finally landing on me, none of this would be possible without my amazing sister Alexandra, whose operational expertise has brought us to this pivotal moment. I'm counting on her continued leadership in day-to-day operations while I focus on our strategic transformation. The applause was enthusiastic but uncertain. Employees glancing between Rebecca and me, clearly trying to gauge the true dynamic. I maintained a pleasant, neutral expression, the same one I used during difficult supplier negotiations. After the town hall, Rebecca was scheduled for individual meetings with department heads. I had insisted on attending these as well, positioning it as an opportunity to facilitate her transition. My real purpose, of course, was to witness firsthand what she was telling my carefully built team. The marketing department meeting went exactly as I expected. Rebecca immediately connecting with our team over industry jargon and mutual New York connections. But the production meeting was where things got interesting. "So these vertical integration initiatives," Rebecca said, scanning the report I'd prepared. "Acquiring the beeswax farm and the botanical distillery. The investment appears significant." Diane, my loyal production director, straightened in her chair. "Those acquisitions have reduced our raw material costs by 32% while improving quality control and consistency. They've been transformative." Rebecca smiled thinly. "I'm sure they seemed sensible at the time, but luxury brands typically outsource to specialized suppliers who can focus exclusively on their core competencies. We might want to reconsider this strategy." I watched Diane's face flush with suppressed anger. "These aren't generic suppliers, Ms. Winters. These are artisanal operations with techniques that date back generations. Their knowledge is irreplaceable." "Please call me Rebecca," my sister said smoothly. "And I understand the sentiment truly. But emotion can't drive business decisions at our scale." Before Diane could respond, I interjected. "The vertical integration wasn't based on sentiment, Rebecca. It was based on margins. I'd be happy to walk you through the 5-year ROI projection that justified the investment." The board approved. It unanimously, as I recall. Rebecca's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. I'm sure it made perfect sense for where the company was positioned then. I'm just considering where we need to be positioned going forward." The rest of the day followed a similar pattern. Rebecca questioning established strategies, dismissing successful initiatives as outdated, and repeatedly referring to her vision for elevating the brand without offering concrete operational plans. By 6 p.m., when most employees had left for the day, I was mentally exhausted from maintaining my professional facade. I was gathering my things to leave when Rebecca appeared in my office doorway. "Quite a day," she said, leaning against the frame. She'd removed her suit jacket, but still looked impossibly polished after hours of meetings. "Indeed," I replied neutrally. "How do you think it went?" She entered without invitation, settling into the chair across from my desk. People are understandably nervous about change. That's natural. They're nervous about unnecessary change, I corrected. Many of these folks have been with the company for over a decade. They've built successful careers here. They know what works. Rebecca sighed dramatically. That's exactly the problem, Alex. They're too close to see the bigger picture. This company has so much more potential than what you've tapped. The casual dismissal of 16 years of growth stung, but I kept my expression neutral. What specific potential do you see that I've missed? Positioning, for one. We're trapped in this middle market limbo, too expensive for mass retail, not exclusive enough for true luxury. The new European competitors are eating into our market share because they understand aspirational branding. Our market share has grown consistently for 11 consecutive quarters, I pointed out. Including those European brands you admire so much. She waved this away. Temporary momentum. The market is shifting, and we need to shift with it. Based on what data? I challenged myself. Based on where consumer desire is trending, on cultural indicators, on aesthetic evolution. She leaned forward. Alex, I know this is hard. You've been running things your way for so long, but sometimes fresh eyes see what familiar ones can't. The condescension was almost more than I could bear. Fresh eyes? She hadn't spent a single day in this industry before yesterday. I appreciate your perspective, I said carefully. But I hope you'll take time to understand why we've made the strategic choices we have before dismantling systems that are working exceptionally well. Of course, she agreed readily. That's why I'm counting on you during this transition. No one knows the old Luminous legacy better than you do. The old Luminous legacy. As if the company I'd built was already a relic of the past. One more thing, she added, rising to leave. I'll need comprehensive reports on all major client relationships, supplier contracts, and operational workflows by Friday. My team will be conducting a full audit of our systems starting next week. Your team, I echoed. Yes, I'm bringing in a few trusted colleagues from New York to help with the transition and rebrand. They'll need complete access and cooperation from your staff. And there it was, the first move in her takeover strategy. Outside consultants who knew nothing about our business would now be evaluating the teams I'd built. I could already imagine their recommendations. Streamline operations, translation, layoffs, optimize supplier relationships, translation, break long-standing partnerships for marginal cost savings, modernize production methods, translation, sacrifice quality for efficiency. I'll prepare the reports, I said, my tone professional despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. Though it would have been helpful to know about these consultants earlier for proper planning. Rebecca flashed, her perfect smile again. That's why you're so valuable, Alex. Always thinking about the logistics. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Mom wants us both for dinner tonight at the house. Family time, she says. 7 o'clock. After she left, I sat motionless, processing what had just transpired. Rebecca wasn't just planning to take my title. She was planning to systematically dismantle the company I'd built and replace it with her vision of what it should be. And she was bringing in outsiders to help her do it. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Sam, our legal counsel. And my friend, need to talk. Rebecca's bringing in outside consultants for a full audit. Time to discuss those protective measures we spoke about. His response came immediately. My place, 9 p.m., after your family dinner. Speaking of which, I glanced at my watch. I had just enough time to go home, change and prepare myself for what promised to be an excruciating evening of pretending we were still a happy family, despite the business betrayal hanging over us all. My mother's house remained largely unchanged from my childhood. The same faded floral couch, the same collection of candles from our earliest product lines displayed proudly on the mantel, the same family photos chronicling our growth from gap-toothed children to adults. The only notable addition was a framed magazine cover featuring Rebecca from her advertising days, prominently displayed on the entryway table. I arrived exactly at 7, carrying a bottle of wine I knew my mother favored. Through the window, I could see Rebecca and my mother already sitting at the dining table laughing over something. The perfect picture of maternal bonding, an image I once took for granted but now felt excluded from. My mother brightened when I entered. Alexandra. Perfect timing. Rebecca was just telling me about her ideas for our holiday collection. Our holiday collection. The one I'd already finalized with our product development team 3 months ago, after extensive customer research and trend analysis. How interesting, I said, uncorking the wine to give my hands something to do. I wasn't aware you'd had time to review our existing holiday plans. Rebecca waved dismissively. Oh, I haven't seen the actual production specs yet. I'm just sharing some conceptual directions I think would better position us in the luxury gift market. I poured the wine carefully, focusing on not spilling a drop. The holiday collection has already moved into production, actually. We finalize seasonal lines 2 quarters in advance to ensure timely delivery to retail partners. That seems unnecessarily rigid, Rebecca commented. In advertising, we pivot campaigns constantly based on market feedback and cultural moments. Candle production isn't advertising, I pointed out, taking my seat. Physical products require material sourcing, testing, quality control protocols, packaging design, production scheduling. Yes, I understand there are logistics involved, Rebecca interrupted. But surely we can be more responsive to emerging trends. Mom agrees we should consider a limited capsule collection for high-end retailers. My mother nodded enthusiastically. Rebecca's idea for a winter palace theme with crystal-embedded vessels sounds divine, doesn't it? I took a careful sip of wine before responding. Crystal-embedded vessels would require completely new production methods, extensive safety testing, and likely specialized equipment. Not something we could implement in time for this holiday season. See, this is exactly why I wanted to join the company, Rebecca said, leaning forward. You're thinking about limitations, Alex. I'm thinking about possibilities. The unfairness of this characterization made my hand tighten around my wine glass. I had transformed a small candle shop into an $80 million enterprise precisely by seeing possibilities where others saw limitations. Perhaps we could table business discussion for the evening, my mother suggested, sensing the rising tension. I've made Grandma's lasagna, and I want to hear about both your days. Dinner progressed with superficial pleasantries. Rebecca dominated. The conversation with stories about her high-profile New York life, celebrity clients, fashion week parties, trendy restaurants. My mother hung on every word, asking eager questions about people and places far removed from our small coastal town. I observed them both, struck by how similar they looked when animated by excitement, the same expressive hand gestures, the same slight tilt of the head when laughing. Had I ever shared such easy rapport with my mother? Has my practical nature always made me the odd one out in our family? What about you, Alexandra? My mother finally asked as she served dessert. How are you feeling about everything? The question was so broad, so inadequate to address the seismic shift in my life, that I almost laughed. I'm adjusting, I said, simply. It's a significant change. Change can be invigorating, Rebecca offered, as if providing some profound wisdom. Sometimes we don't realize we're in a rut until we're forced out of it. I set down my fork carefully. I wasn't in a rut, Rebecca. I was building a successful company with consistent year-over-year growth, increasing market share, and industry-leading employee retention rates. Of course, she backpedaled slightly. I just meant that sometimes an outside perspective. You've been at the company for exactly 1 day, I interrupted, unable to maintain the facade any longer. You've attended a few meetings, made some vague pronouncements about elevation and luxury positioning, and now you're planning to overhaul product lines that are already in production. Do you have any idea how this business actually operates? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother looked stricken. Alexandra, she admonished. There's no need for that tone. Rebecca is trying to help grow the company. The Company has grown just fine under my leadership, I replied. From a small local shop to an international brand. What exactly was lacking that required this sudden intervention? Rebecca set down her wine glass. Vision, Alex. Strategic vision. Beyond incremental growth. Mom and the board recognized that I could bring something you can't. And what's that? Buzzwords? New York connections? A designer wardrobe? Enough. My mother's sharp tone cut through the tension. This is exactly why I wanted us to have dinner. Together. To work through these feelings privately as a family. Alexandra, I understand you're hurt, but this hostility isn't constructive. I took a deep breath, struggling to regain my composure. You're right. I apologize for my tone. I turned to Rebecca. I'm sure you have valuable insights to offer. I just hope you'll take time to understand the business thoroughly before implementing major changes. Rebecca nodded, her expression carefully sympathetic. Of course. And I hope you'll try to keep an open mind about my ideas instead of immediately shooting them down. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. This transition will work out, Alexandra. You two balanced each other as children. Rebecca's creativity, your practicality. You'll find that balance again professionally. Her words triggered a memory. Rebecca coming home from art class with a painting our teacher had praised effusively, while my carefully constructed diorama received only a passing nod. My mother had framed Rebecca's artwork immediately, while my project was eventually discarded during spring cleaning. Has the pattern been there all along? The remainder of the evening passed in strained politeness. As we prepared to leave, my mother hugged Rebecca warmly, whispering something in her ear that made them both laugh. Her hug to me was briefer, more perfunctory. Give this time, Alexandra, she said as I reached the door. Change is hard for everyone. In my car, I checked my watch. Still time to meet Sam as planned. As I drove through the familiar streets of Harbor View, I reflected on the dinner conversation. It was abundantly clear that my mother and sister were united in their vision for Luminous Legacy's future, a vision that minimized my contributions and dismissed my expertise. The weight of this realization was crushing. For 16 years, I'd believed I was building something for my family, a legacy we would all share. Now I understood that in their eyes, I had merely been keeping the company running until Rebecca was ready to take over. Sam was waiting on his porch when I arrived. 2 glasses of scotch already poured. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know about how the family dinner had gone. That bad? He asked, handing me a glass. Worse, I replied, sinking into an Adirondack chair. They're completely aligned. Rebecca's already planning to overhaul product lines that are in production, and my mother is encouraging her every whim. Sam sipped his scotch thoughtfully. Then it's time to discuss your options, because from what you've told me, this isn't just about a title. They're looking to fundamentally change the company you built. I nodded, the reality settling heavily on my shoulders. So what can I do? Sam leaned back in his chair, the porch, light casting shadows across his face. We'd been friends since high school. He was one of the few people who truly understood what Luminous Legacy meant to me. You have 3 basic options, he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. First, you can stay and try to work within the new structure, protecting what you've built as best you can while reporting to Rebecca. I grimaced. The thought of watching Rebecca dismantle my life's work piece by piece while pretending to support her vision was almost physically painful. Second, he continued, you can leave, negotiate a separation package, sell your equity, and walk away completely. And let them destroy everything I've built? The words came out sharper than I intended. Or third, Sam said, ignoring my outburst. You can fight back. Strategically. I took a long sip of scotch, feeling it burn all the way down. I'm listening. Your sister may have been handed the CEO title, but she doesn't actually control the company yet. Not really. He leaned forward. Control isn't about titles, Alex. It's about relationships, knowledge, and leverage. And I have all three, I said slowly, beginning to understand. Exactly. Your sister has a fancy title and your mother's support. But you have the loyalty of your employees, the trust of your suppliers and retail partners, and 16 years of institutional knowledge. That can't be transferred in a binder of reports. For the first time since the boardroom ambush, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. So, what's the plan? Sam's expression turned serious. First, we need to protect your personal interests. Tomorrow morning, I'll draft an amended employment contract that clearly outlines your authority, compensation, and severance terms if they decide to terminate you. You think they would? I think Rebecca will eventually want you gone, whether she admits that to herself yet or not. The blunt assessment stung, but I knew he was right. Rebecca didn't want my input. She wanted my compliance. Second, Sam continued, we need to secure your ownership stake. Your 18% equity is significant, especially if you can align with other minority shareholders. I'll review the shareholder agreement for any protective provisions or rights you might have. I nodded. And third? A slight smile crossed his face. Third, we start documenting everything. Every instance of Rebecca making decisions that harm the company's interests, every deviation from established protocols, every potential breach of fiduciary duty. We built a record. For what purpose? Leverage, he said simply. Either to protect your position or to negotiate better terms if you ultimately decide to leave. We spent the next 2 hours outlining a detailed strategy. By the time I left, I felt centered again. Not happy exactly, but purposeful. I had spent 16 years building Luminous legacy. I wouldn't surrender it without a fight. The next morning, I arrived at the office before dawn, as was my custom. The early hours had always been my most productive. Time to think strategically before the day's operational demands took over. I was reviewing production reports when Diane knocked on my open door. Got a minute? She asked, closing the door behind her without waiting for a response. What's wrong? Rebecca's consulting team arrived last night. They're set up in the conference room, requesting files, asking questions, and generally making everyone nervous. I frowned. Already? She only mentioned them yesterday. Apparently, they flew in overnight. 3 of them, all former colleagues from her advertising agency. None with any manufacturing experience. This was moving faster than I'd anticipated. What kind of information are they requesting? Everything. Production costs, employee records, supplier contracts, customer acquisition data. Diane's expression was grim. And they're scheduling one-on-one meetings with all department heads. Privately. The strategy was clear. Divide and conquer. Get. My team members alone, away from my influence, and either convert them to Rebecca's vision or identify them as obstacles to be removed. Thank you for telling me, I said, keeping my voice calm despite my internal alarm. Let's not panic. Ask everyone to direct information requests through proper channels and remind them they're entitled to have HR present for any meetings regarding their performance or position. Diane nodded, looking relieved to have a concrete response. There's one more thing. They've specifically requested access to your original product formulations and design notes, the ones from before the company was formally incorporated. That got my attention. Those early formulations, particularly for the coastal memories, and seasonal transitions lines, were technically my personal intellectual property. I had developed them before we had formal employment agreements or IP assignment protocols. While I had never restricted the company from using them, I had also never formally transferred ownership. Interesting, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Please inform them that those materials are part of my personal archives. If they need specific information, they can submit a detailed request, and I'll consider it. After Diane left, I immediately called Sam. Rebecca's consultants are already here, and they're asking about my early product formulations, the ones we discussed last night. That's not a coincidence, Sam replied. They're obviously doing an intellectual property audit. Make sure you don't share anything without a proper review. I'll have that employment contract amended by lunch. I spent the morning strategically visible, walking the production floor, checking in with team leaders, maintaining a calm, confident presence. The message was clear. Despite the new CEO, I was still actively leading operations. The grateful looks from longtime employees told me the message was received. At 11 a.m., Rebecca summoned me to what had previously been my weekly operations review, a meeting I had established years ago to maintain alignment across departments. I arrived to find her and her 3 consultants already seated, with no other Luminous Legacy staff present. Alexandra? Perfect, Rebecca smiled. I'd like you to meet the transition team. This is Martin, Sophia, and Derek, all brilliant strategists, who will be helping us reimagine Luminous Legacy's future. I nodded politely, taking in their expensive suits and city pallor. None of them had the calloused hands or permanent botanical stains that marked everyone who actually worked in our production facilities. Welcome to Harborview, I said. I understand you've been requesting quite a bit of information. We're conducting a comprehensive audit, said Martin, a sharp-featured man who practically radiated smug authority. Standard procedure for any leadership transition. Of course, I replied smoothly. Though typically such audits are conducted by individuals with industry expertise. Rebecca's smile tightened. Martin managed the L'Essence luxury brand account at our agency. Sophia specializes in supply chain optimization, and Derek is a digital transformation expert. They bring valuable outside perspectives. Translation: none of them knew the first thing about candle production or the home fragrance market. I see. Well, I'm happy to help orient them to our industry's unique challenges. Perhaps we could start with a tour of the production facility? It's difficult to understand our business without seeing how the products are actually made. Rebecca exchanged glances with Martin. We'll get to that eventually. Right now, we're focused on the high-level strategic review. Of course they were. Because actually understanding the business would interfere with their preconceived plans to transform it. Now, Rebecca continued, about those early product formulations. Diane mentioned they're in your personal archives? That's correct, I confirmed. I developed those before we had formal intellectual property protocols in place. But they're company products, Martin interjected, used in company lines for years. With my permission, I clarified, but the original formulations remain my personal intellectual property, as they were developed before my formal employment agreement. Rebecca's expression darkened. Alex, this isn't helpful. We're all on the same team here. Are we? I asked, mildly. Because it feels like your team arrived with an agenda developed without any input from the people who actually built this business. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, Rebecca sighed dramatically. I had hoped we could avoid this kind of adversarial approach, but clearly you're still processing your feelings about the leadership change. She turned to her consultants. Let's table this discussion for now. Alexandra and I should speak privately. After the consultants filed out, Rebecca closed the conference room door and turned to me. Gone was the polished smile, replaced by a cold determination I'd never seen before. This isn't going to work if you fight me at every turn, Alexandra. And this isn't going to work if you steamroll 16 years of business development without understanding what you're dismantling, I countered, keeping my voice level. She ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair, a rare gesture of frustration, breaking through her composed exterior. Why can't you see this as an opportunity? We could be an amazing team if you'd just support my vision instead of clinging to the past. Your vision? Rebecca, you've been here for 2 days. You have no idea what makes this company successful. I know exactly what makes businesses successful, she snapped. Brand positioning, market perception, cultural relevance, things you've... consistently undervalued while focusing on production minutia. The dismissal of everything I'd built as minutia made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. Those minutia are why we have industry-leading margins and customer loyalty scores that our competitors envy. And yet we're still perceived as a mid-tier brand instead of a true luxury player. She leaned forward. Do you know what Luminous Legacy's products sell for in Europe? 3 times their US price point, because European consumers understand quality craftsmanship. But here, we're undervalued because your branding and positioning strategy lacks sophistication. I blinked, genuinely surprised. You've researched our European market penetration? Of course I have. I've been planning this transition for months. A flicker of something like hurt crossed her face. Did you think Mom just handed me this role? On a whim? That I haven't been studying this business intensively? For a moment, I saw my sister differently. Not as the favored daughter being handed my life's work, but as someone who had genuinely prepared for this role, albeit from her own perspective. Then help me understand your strategy, I said, making an effort to sound open-minded. Not consultant buzzwords about elevation and transformation, but your actual plan. Rebecca seemed momentarily taken aback by my shift in tone. She sat down across from me, her expression serious. The home fragrance market is bifurcating, she began. Budget brands are capturing the low end through mass retail and discount pricing. True luxury brands are elevating at the high end through exclusive distribution and experiential marketing. The dangerous place to be is the middle, which is exactly where Luminous Legacy sits now. I had to admit, her analysis wasn't entirely wrong. So you want to move us up market? Dramatically up market, she confirmed. Limited edition collections, exclusive retail partnerships, artistic collaborations, immersive brand experiences. I want our candles displayed in museum gift shops and luxury hotel suites, not big box retailers. That's a massive pivot that would require significant investment and would alienate our current customer base, I pointed out. Not if we create a diffusion line for the mass market while elevating our core brand. She pulled out a tablet and opened a presentation. Look, at this revenue projection, the numbers were ambitious, potentially even unrealistic, but the strategy wasn't entirely unsound. The problem was implementation. Rebecca, even if I agreed with this direction, and I'm not saying I do, you're underestimating the operational complexity. Our production methods are designed for our current product lines and volume. The kind of limited runs and custom elements you're envisioning would require completely different processes, which is why we need to outsource production to specialized fabricators, she replied immediately. Keep only our most skilled artisans for the luxury collections. And lay off half our workforce? People who've been with us for years? In a town where we're the largest employer? She had the grace to look uncomfortable. Sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for growth. And there it was, the fundamental difference in our approaches. I had built Luminous Legacy as a community, with responsibilities to our employees, our hometown, and our loyal customers. Rebecca saw it as merely a brand to be optimized for maximum profit and prestige. I can't support this direction, I said, finally. It betrays everything this company stands for. Rebecca's expression hardened. Then we have a problem, because this is happening with or without your support. You need my cooperation to make any significant operational changes, I reminded her. And you definitely need it to access my proprietary formulations. Actually, she said, sliding a document across the table. I don't. I glanced down at the paper, a formal notice of changes to the company's organizational structure. Effective immediately, all department heads would report directly to Rebecca's newly created transformation team. My role as COO was being redefined as legacy advisor, essentially a ceremonial position with no actual authority. This is ridiculous, I said, pushing the paper back toward her. You can't just eliminate my position. The board approved it this morning. Her voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of triumph. I was trying to find a diplomatic way to tell you. I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. The board met without notifying me? It was an emergency session. Given your resistance to necessary changes, we felt it was best to move quickly. We? You and Mom, you mean? Rebecca didn't deny it. Mom understands what's necessary for this company's future. She's always had vision, Alex. She just needed someone willing to execute it boldly. The implication was clear. I had never been bold enough, visionary enough, for our mother's taste. Despite 16 years of proven success, I was still disappointed. So, what exactly are you offering me? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. 2 options. Rebecca straightened in her chair. All business now. Accept the role of legacy advisor with your current compensation package, share your formulations and institutional knowledge during the transition, and publicly support our new direction. And the second option? A generous separation agreement. 3 years salary, accelerated vesting of your equity with a guaranteed buyout at current valuation, and a non-disparagement clause. They wanted to erase me, pay me off and make me disappear quietly. The thought was both infuriating and deeply painful. I need time to consider, I said, rising from my seat. You have until tomorrow morning, Rebecca replied. The transition team needs to finalize the organizational announcement. I walked out without another word, my mind racing. In the hallway, I nearly collided with Diane, who was hovering near the door with obvious concern. Alex? Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I pulled her into an empty office. They're restructuring the entire organization. All department heads will report to Rebecca's team, effective immediately. Diane's face paled. They can't just... They can. The board approved it. What? Are you going to do... she whispered. I took a deep breath. I'm not sure yet, but I need you to do something for me. Quietly, tell the operations team leaders to meet me at Harbor Brew at 7 p.m. tonight. No digital communication, in person only. And Diane, don't tell anyone else. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. Harbor Brew at 7, just ops leaders. I'll make it happen. Back in my office, I closed the door and finally allowed myself a moment of pure, unfiltered emotional response. My hands shook as I picked up a framed photo of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for our second production facility. My mother and I standing side by side, matching proud smiles as we held the oversized scissors. Had she been planning this betrayal? Even then? How long had she viewed me as merely a placeholder until Rebecca was ready to take over? I set the photo down and reached for my phone. I needed to call Sam immediately. The timeline had accelerated dramatically, and I needed to understand my legal options before making any decisions. But as my finger hovered over his contact, another thought struck me. What if I didn't fight this on their terms? What if there was another way, something neither Rebecca nor my mother would see coming? For the first time since this nightmare began, a genuine smile crossed my face. They thought they had backed me into a corner, forcing me to choose between capitulation and exile. But there was always another option for someone willing to think creatively. And if there was one thing 16 years of building a business from nothing had taught me, it was how to turn limitations into opportunities. Harbor Brew was the kind of local establishment that tourists rarely discovered. A weathered building with creaky floors and mismatched furniture, but the best craft beer in 3 counties. It was where local business owners gathered, where deals were made on handshakes, and where I'd built relationships with many of my early suppliers over pitchers of their signature IPA. By 7:15 p.m., my most trusted team members had assembled in the back room: Diane from production, Marco from R&D, Jen from supply chain, Carlos from quality control, and Elliot from facilities. Together, they represented over 70 years of experience at Luminous Legacy, and managed nearly 80% of our operational staff. Thank you all for coming, I began after the door was closed and drinks were served. What I'm about to share is sensitive, but you deserve to know what's happening. I explained the day's developments, Rebecca's restructuring plan, my effective demotion, and the ultimatum I'd been given. As I spoke, I watched their expressions shift from concern to outrage. They can't just throw away everything we've built, Jen said, her voice tight with anger. The systems we've developed, the relationships with suppliers. Rebecca has no idea what she's dismantling. Actually, she does, I corrected. That's what makes this situation complex. Rebecca isn't stupid. She has a legitimate strategic vision. It's just fundamentally incompatible with the company we've built. What's her plan? Marco asked. To transform Luminous Legacy into an exclusive luxury brand. Outsource production, eliminate our mid-market lines, focus on limited editions and high-end retail partnerships. I took a sip of my beer. And in the process, likely eliminate half our workforce and close our vertical integration facilities. A stunned silence fell over the table. That would destroy Harborview's economy, Elliot finally said. We employ nearly 15% of the town directly, and the ripple effects? Carlos shook his head. Not to mention throwing away our competitive advantage. Our quality control systems are what set us apart. You can't outsource that institutional knowledge. I know, I agreed. Which is why I've called you here. I need your honest input on something I'm considering. They leaned forward expectantly. What? Would you say if I told you I was thinking of starting a new company? The question hung in the air for a moment before Diane broke into a slow smile. I'd ask, where do I sign up? A murmur of agreement circulated around the table. It wouldn't be easy, I cautioned. We'd be starting from scratch. Limited resources, no brand recognition, competing against a company that knows our playbook. But we'd be building something authentic, Jen pointed out. Something true to our values. And we'd have something Luminous Legacy wouldn't, Marco added. You, your expertise, your vision, your formulations. I felt a surge of gratitude for their confidence. I wouldn't ask any of you to leave secure positions without a solid plan. There are significant challenges, including potential legal issues with non-compete clauses. My contract doesn't have a non-compete, Diane said immediately. They tried to add one last year during my review, but I refused. Around the table, the others nodded. Apparently, my team had been more forward-thinking than I'd realized. Even so, I continued, we'd need capital, facilities, supplier relationships. It would be months before we could bring a product to market. The old Pearson warehouse on the east side has been vacant for years, Elliot said. Basic structure is sound, rent would be reasonable, and it has the power capacity we'd need for production equipment. And I happen to know that Anderson Supplies is unhappy with how Rebecca's consultants have been treating them, Jen added. They might be persuaded to extend terms to a new venture. I looked around at their enthusiastic faces, feeling a complex mixture of emotions, gratitude for their loyalty, excitement at the possibilities, and deep sadness that it had come to this. Before we go any further, I need to be completely transparent, I said. If you joined me in this venture, you'd be walking away from job security, benefits, and everything you've helped build at Luminous Legacy. There are no guarantees this would succeed. Carlos, typically the most cautious of the group, spoke up. Alex, we all know what Rebecca's transformation will mean for our teams. Most of us will eventually be replaced by her New York connections or eliminated entirely when she outsources production. At least this way we go out on our terms, building something we believe in. Their confidence was humbling. For the first time since the boardroom ambush, I felt something like hope, not just for myself, but for the vision of business I believed in. All right, I said, pulling out a notebook. Let's get practical. If we were to do this, what would we need, and how quickly could we assemble it? For the next 3 hours, We outlined a rough but viable business plan. Elliot would investigate the warehouse space. Jen would quietly assess which suppliers might follow us. Marco would compile digital backups of R&D work that wasn't proprietary to Luminous Legacy. Carlos would identify essential quality control equipment we'd need to acquire. By the time we left Harbor Brew near midnight, we had a framework for what was possible. I still hadn't made a final decision. There were legal and financial details to resolve, and the enormity of walking away from 16 years of work couldn't be underestimated. But for the first time, I could see a path forward that didn't involve either capitulation or exile. Back at home, I called Sam. Despite the late hour, he answered immediately. "Did you make a decision?" he asked, skipping pleasantries. "Not exactly," I replied. "But I'm considering an option we hadn't discussed, starting a new company." A long pause followed. "That's bold and potentially complicated from a legal standpoint." "I know. That's why I need your advice. What am I allowed to take? With me? What would trigger litigation? Your early formulations that were never formally assigned to the company are yours," he said immediately. "Your industry relationships, general knowledge, skills, also yours. What you can't take are company trade secrets, proprietary processes, developed while employed, customer lists, or anything that would constitute corporate theft." "I understand. What about recruiting employees?" "Trickier. You can't actively solicit while still employed, and depending on their contracts, there might be issues even after you leave. We'd need to review each situation carefully." I took a deep breath. "And my equity stake? What happens to that if I leave and become a competitor?" "Your equity remains yours, unless there's a specific clause requiring divestment upon competition. But they could make your life difficult if you try to exercise any shareholder rights after leaving." He paused. "Alexandra, are you sure about this? Starting over at 41 won't be easy." Was I sure? No. But the alternative, watching Rebecca dismantle everything I'd built while being relegated to a figurehead position, was unthinkable. "I need to at least explore it as an option before making my final decision," I said. "Can you come to my house tomorrow morning before I have to give Rebecca my answer?" "I'll be there at 7 a.m., he promised. After hanging up, I walked to my home office and pulled out the leather-bound journal where I'd documented my very first candle formulations. The pages were yellowed now, stained with wax and essential oils, covered in my meticulous handwriting, ratios, temperatures, curing times, fragrance combinations. These were mine. Not Luminous Legacy's, not my mother's, and certainly not Rebecca's. Mine. I ran my fingers over the pages, remembering the excitement of each discovery, each successful experiment. Then I began to make a list of every formulation, technique, and design concept I had developed before signing my formal employment agreement 16 years ago. By dawn, I had a comprehensive inventory of what was indisputably mine, the foundation upon which a new company could potentially be built. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to start with. The question now was whether I had the courage to walk away from the empire I'd built and begin again from scratch. When Sam arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and a stack of legal documents, I was ready to discuss specifics. For 2 hours, we reviewed my options, the legal risks, and the financial implications of each possible path forward. "The separation agreement they're offering is actually quite generous," Sam pointed out. 3 years' salary plus equity buyout would give you substantial capital to fund a new venture. "But it likely includes non-compete and non-solicitation clauses," I countered. He nodded. "Almost certainly. We'd need to negotiate those terms carefully if you're serious about starting something new." By 9 a.m. I had reached the office. My decision was made. I felt strangely calm as I walked through the headquarters I had designed, past the employees I had hired, toward the inevitable confrontation that would change everything. Rebecca was waiting in the conference room with her consultants. My mother was there too, a surprise addition that momentarily threw me off balance. I hadn't expected her to attend what was essentially an HR meeting. "Alexandra," Rebecca greeted me with professional politeness. "Have you had time to consider our options?" "I have," I replied, taking a seat across from them. "But before I share my decision, I'd like to ask Mom a question." My mother looked startled. "Me?" "This is between you and Rebecca as CEO." "Humor me," I said, meeting her eyes directly. "When did you first decide that Rebecca should replace me as head of Luminous Legacy?" She flushed slightly. "Alexandra, that's not relevant to—" "It's entirely relevant to me," I interrupted. "Was it a recent decision or something you've planned for years?" Rebecca interjected. "We should stay focused on the current situation." "No," my mother said suddenly. "She deserves an answer." She took a deep breath. "It wasn't planned for years, Alexandra. But about 8 months ago, when Rebecca mentioned she was feeling unfulfilled at the agency, I began to consider the possibility. 8 months. While I was securing our largest international distribution deal, expanding our production capacity, and developing the hotel partnership that would transform our business model, my mother had been plotting my replacement. "And you never thought to discuss this with me?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "To see if we could find a role for Rebecca that utilized her skills without completely dismantling my position?" "I knew you wouldn't support the direction we needed to take," my mother replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. "You've always been resistant to significant change, Alexandra. You prefer incremental improvements to bold transformation." "Those incremental improvements built an $80 million company from a small-town shop," I pointed out. "And they've taken us as far as they can," Rebecca cut in. "The market is changing, Alex. We need to position for the future, not cling to past strategies." I studied them both, my mother and sister, so alike in their certainty, their conviction that their vision was the only correct path forward. Had I ever truly belonged in this family business? Or had I always been the outsider, valued for my practical contributions but never fully embraced as a visionary leader? "I've made my decision," I said finally. "I'm leaving Luminous Legacy." Flash of victory crossed Rebecca's face before she composed her expression into one of regret. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I respect your choice. I'll have HR prepare the separation agreement we discussed." "No need," I replied, sliding a document across the table. "Sam has already prepared terms that I find acceptable." Rebecca frowned, taking the document. "This is significantly different from what we offered." "Yes, it is." I smiled thinly. "My counteroffer removes the non-compete and non-solicitation clauses, maintains my equity stake with full voting rights, and includes a 2-year consulting provision that grants me a seat at any strategic planning meetings." "This is completely unacceptable," Martin, the lead consultant, interjected. "Without non-compete provisions, there's nothing preventing you from immediately becoming a competitor." "Exactly," I agreed. "Which is why you'll either accept these terms, or I'll stay as COO and exercise every legal right I have to challenge yesterday's board decision, require formal reviews of all strategic changes, and generally make your transformation as difficult as legally possible." My mother looked stunned. "Alexandra, this is extortion." "No, it's negotiation. Something I learned leading this company for 16 years. I turned to Rebecca. "You have 2 choices. Give me a clean break with the freedom to pursue my own path, or keep me here as a thorn in your side, challenging every decision and requiring justification for every change." The consultants all began speaking at once, but Rebecca silenced them with a raised hand. She studied me for a long moment, genuine curiosity in her expression. "You're planning to start a competing company, aren't you?" I met her gaze directly. "I'm planning to build something that reflects my values and vision, just as you're reshaping Luminous Legacy to reflect yours. It would never work, Martin scoffed. You don't have the capital, facilities, or brand recognition to compete with an established player like Luminous Legacy. I smiled, thinking of the team waiting for my decision. The warehouse Elliot was already investigating. The suppliers Jen had quietly contacted. I started with nothing but a small-town candle shop 16 years ago. I'm not afraid to build from the ground up again. Rebecca leaned back, a calculating look in her eyes. You know what? I'll accept your terms. Rebecca, my mother protested. You can't, seriously. It's the right business decision, Mom, Rebecca interrupted. Fighting a legal battle with Alexandra would be costly, time-consuming, and bad for company morale. Better to make a clean break and focus on our transformation. She turned back to me. But remove the consulting provision and board seat. If you're going to be a competitor, you don't get a vote in our strategy. I nodded. Fair enough. I'll have Sam revise the agreement. My mother looked between us, bewilderment evident on her face. I don't understand either of you. This is a family business. How did we get to this point? You made it a business first and family second, I said gently. And that's fine. But business decisions have business consequences. As I rose to leave, Rebecca called after me. Just one thing, Alexandra. When you launch this new venture, don't expect any special treatment because we're sisters. I'll compete to win. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like respect for her. At least she was honest about her ambition. I wouldn't expect anything less. Outside, I texted the team. Decision made. Meeting at Harbor. Brew, 6 p.m. Operation Phoenix begins. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. My departure from Luminous Legacy was positioned as an amicable separation to pursue new opportunities, though industry insiders immediately began speculating. About the real story, I signed the revised agreement, cleared out my office, and said goodbye to 16 years of my life in a single afternoon. The hardest part was saying farewell to the employees who wouldn't be joining my new venture. I couldn't take everyone, and many had family situations that made the risk of a startup impossible. Each goodbye felt like abandoning a member of the family I'd actually chosen, the community I'd built around shared values and mutual respect. This isn't the end, I promised Lucille, a production supervisor who had been with us for 11 years. Just a new chapter. She hugged me tightly. Show them what real leadership looks like, Alex. Meanwhile, my core team had been working tirelessly on the foundation of our new company. Elliot secured a lease on the Pearson warehouse at a favorable rate. Marco had compiled all our eligible formulations and techniques. Jen had identified suppliers willing to work with us despite potential pressure from Luminous Legacy. Carlos had located used production equipment that would allow us to begin operations with minimal investment. The final piece fell into place when Cameron Reynolds, CEO of Walderton Hotels, called me directly. I heard you left Luminous Legacy, he said without preamble, and I heard rumors you're starting something new. News travels fast, I replied cautiously. In this industry, lightning fast. He paused. Alexandra, we signed that partnership agreement with Luminous Legacy because of you. Your quality standards, your understanding of our brand needs, your transparency in production. Since you've left, we've received nothing but marketing presentations and vague assurances from consultants who don't understand our requirements. My heart quickened. What are you suggesting, Cameron? I'm suggesting that our legal team has identified several performance clauses in our agreement that Luminous Legacy may struggle to meet without your leadership. I'm further suggesting that we might be open to partnering with a new venture that maintains the standards and values we originally signed up for. It was the lifeline we needed, a potential anchor client that would provide immediate revenue and credibility. I'd be very interested in discussing that possibility, I said carefully. Once appropriate legal review ensures no conflicts with My separation agreement, of course. Of course, he agreed. Let's set something up for next week. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for a moment. The path forward was materializing faster than I'd dared hope. It wouldn't be easy. Startups never were. But we had a viable foundation. A core team, facilities, supplier relationships, potential anchor clients, and most importantly, a shared vision. That evening, I drove to Lighthouse Point, the place where this journey had begun and where I'd retreated to process the initial betrayal. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. As I walked along the familiar rocky path, I reflected on everything that had happened. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but something else had taken root alongside it, a sense of liberation. For 16 years, I had built someone else's dream, always seeking approval that would never fully come. Now I had the chance to build something that was truly mine, surrounded by people who shared my values and vision. As darkness fell, and the lighthouse beam began its steady sweep across the water, I took out my phone and typed a message to my team. I've decided on a name for our new venture, Phoenix Flame Artisanal. Because the best legacy rises from the ashes of what came before. 18 months later, I stood in the center of our production floor, watching as employees carefully packaged our newest collection for shipment. The warehouse had been transformed, modern. Production equipment humming efficiently alongside artisanal workstations, where our most skilled craftspeople hand-finished premium pieces. Natural light streamed through the skylights we'd installed, illuminating a space that perfectly balanced craftsmanship with scale. Final quality check complete, Carlos called from his station. The Walderton Equinox collection is ready to ship. I nodded with satisfaction. The hotel partnership that Rebecca had dismissed as insufficiently prestigious had become the cornerstone of Phoenix Flame's early success. Cameron had not only transferred their business to us, but had become our most vocal advocate, introducing us to other high-end hospitality groups seeking authentic artisanal products with reliable production standards. The first year is the hardest, everyone had told me when we launched. They weren't wrong. Despite our experienced team and my industry connections, building a company from scratch had been grueling. 16-hour days were the norm. Equipment, breakdowns, supply chain challenges, cash flow concerns, we'd weathered them all in those early months. But we'd also experienced triumphs that made the struggles worthwhile. Our first production run sold out in under a week. Our handcrafted Harbor Lights collection was featured in Design Quarterly. The day we hired our 20th employee, many of whom had previously worked at Luminous Legacy but left as Rebecca's, our transformation dismantled the company culture they'd valued. Alexandra? Diane approached, clipboard in hand. The feature wall is ready whenever you want to see it. I followed her to our newly opened visitor center, where a striking display showcased Phoenix Flame's journey from concept to thriving enterprise. Photos, news clippings, and product evolution timelines told the story of our rapid growth. It looks perfect, I said, studying the carefully arranged narrative. Though I'm not sure about putting my picture so prominently, this has been a team effort from day one. Diane shook her head with familiar exasperation. The founder's story matters, Alex. People connect with the human element behind the brand. She was right, of course. Our company had resonated with consumers, precisely because of its authentic origins. A master craftsperson striking out to preserve traditional methods in an increasingly mass-produced world. It wasn't the full story, but it was true enough. I was examining a display of our first product line when the front door chimed. Turning, I was stunned to see my mother standing hesitantly in the entrance. "Alexandra," she said softly, "do you have a moment?" I hadn't seen her in over a year. Our only communication had been through lawyers finalizing the separation agreement and the occasional terse email regarding shareholder matters at Luminous Legacy. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, the confident businesswoman now, showing signs of uncertainty. Of course, I replied, leading her to my office. This is unexpected. She settled into a chair, glancing around at the space that reflected my personal aesthetic. Practical yet warm, with samples of our products displayed alongside industry awards we'd already begun to accumulate. Your place is impressive, she offered. I've been following your progress in the trade publications. Thank you. I sat across from her, curious but guarded. What brings you here, Mom? She sighed deeply. Several things. First, I wanted to see for myself what you've built. The industry is talking about Phoenix Flame as the most innovative newcomer in years. I nodded, acknowledging the compliment, but waiting for the real purpose of her visit. And second, she continued, I wanted to apologize. The way we handled your replacement was wrong. You deserved better after everything you contributed to Luminous Legacy. The apology caught me off guard. My mother had never been one to admit mistakes easily. What prompted this realization? I asked carefully. She hesitated, then answered with unexpected candor. Reality, I suppose. Rebecca's vision for Luminous Legacy hasn't unfolded quite as smoothly as she anticipated. This was news to me. I'd deliberately avoided seeking information about my former company, focusing instead on building Phoenix Flame. What's happening at Luminous Legacy? The transformation has been challenging. Moving headquarters to New York tripled overhead. Costs. Outsourcing production led to quality control issues we never experienced under your management. And several key retail partners were unhappy with the strategic shift away from mid-market distribution. I absorbed this information without comment, though I couldn't help feeling a twinge of vindication. The financial results have been disappointing, she continued. The luxury repositioning hasn't gained traction as quickly as Rebecca projected, while we've lost significant market share in our core segments. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in thinking of the employees whose livelihoods might be affected by these struggles. My mother looked at me directly. There's a third reason for my visit, Alexandra. I want to discuss a potential collaboration between our companies. I couldn't hide my surprise. Collaboration? After everything that happened? Business is business, she said, echoing the justification she'd given for replacing me. Rebecca's vision has strengths. Her marketing instincts and luxury branding expertise are valuable, but she lacks your operational excellence and product development skills. Together, the companies could be complementary. The irony was almost too perfect. After pushing me out because my approach wasn't aligned with their vision, they now wanted to leverage my expertise while maintaining separate control of Luminous Legacy. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. A strategic partnership, shared distribution channels, collaborative collections, possibly even some consolidated production facilities. Phoenix Flame would remain independent, but we would coordinate certain business activities for mutual benefit. I considered her proposal carefully. From a purely business perspective, there was potential merit. Phoenix Flame had established itself as an artisanal brand with impeccable quality and production efficiency, while Luminous Legacy still retained brand recognition and market reach despite recent stumbles. But this wasn't just a business decision. It was personal. Does Rebecca support this idea? I asked. My mother shifted uncomfortably. She sees the potential benefits, though she's hesitant about certain aspects. The board is strongly in favor, however. Translation. Rebecca wasn't on board, but the company's financial situation had forced the board to intervene. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. But I've worked extremely hard to build Phoenix Flame with a very specific culture and vision. I'm not willing to compromise that, even for potential business advantages. I understand, my mother replied, disappointment evident in her voice. But would you at least consider a more limited collaboration? Perhaps a single joint collection to test the concept? I thought about my team, the people who had taken a leap of faith to follow me into this new venture. What message would it send if I partnered with the very company that had betrayed me and, by extension, them? I need to consult with my leadership team before making any decision, I said finally. This affects all of us, not just me. My mother nodded, rising to leave. At the door, she paused. You've built something remarkable here, Alexandra. Something truly your own. A sad smile crossed her face. In some ways, I'm prouder of what you've accomplished with Phoenix Flame than anything we achieved at Luminous Legacy. After she left, I sat alone in my office, processing the unexpected encounter. The validation I'd once desperately sought from my mother had finally come, but I no longer needed it. My sense of worth now came from within, from the company I'd built, the team I'd assembled, and the values I'd stayed true to throughout. That evening, I gathered my leadership team at Harbor Brew, our unofficial headquarters since Phoenix Flame's inception. I shared my mother's proposal and asked for their honest opinions. It's a trap, Diane said immediately. They're struggling and want to use our success to prop themselves up. Or it's an opportunity, Marco countered. Their distribution network, combined with our production quality, could accelerate our growth significantly. The debate continued, passionately but respectfully, demonstrating exactly why I valued this team so deeply. Unlike my family's approach of imposing decisions from above, Phoenix Flame operated on genuine collaboration and mutual respect. After everyone had spoken, all eyes turned to me for the final decision. We've built something special here, I said. A company that values craftsmanship over shortcuts, people over profits, and authentic relationships over transactions. That's our true competitive advantage. Not just what we make, but how we make it. I took a sip of my beer, looking around at the team that had become my chosen family. But we're also practical business people. I propose a middle path. We'll develop a single collaborative collection with Luminous Legacy, with very specific terms that protect our independence and values. If it works, we'll consider expanding the relationship. If not, we walk away with no regrets. Nods of agreement circulated around the table. It was a measured approach that balanced business opportunity with our core principles, exactly the kind of decision-making that had become Phoenix Flame's hallmark. 3 months later, as I watched the limited edition Reconciliation Collection being packaged for shipment, featuring designs that harmonized elements from both companies' aesthetic traditions, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. The betrayal that had seemed like the end of my professional world had actually been the beginning of something more authentic and fulfilling. Phoenix Flame had already surpassed my first-year revenue projections by 40%, with a second production facility under construction and a waiting list of potential retail partners. More importantly, I had built a company that truly reflected my values, where employees were treated with respect, where quality was never sacrificed for expediency, and where success was measured not just in dollars, but in impact and integrity. For my relationship with my mother and Rebecca, it remained complicated. Our companies now had a limited business relationship, but the personal wounds healed more slowly. Perhaps they always would. That evening, I drove once more to Lighthouse Point, the place where both Luminous Legacy and Phoenix Flame had been conceived in moments of crisis and clarity. As the sun set over the Atlantic, I remembered the devastated woman who had stood here 18 months ago, reeling from family betrayal and the loss of her life's work. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her something she couldn't possibly have believed then. That the greatest legacy isn't built from familial obligation or inherited opportunity, but from the courage to begin again, to stay true to your values even when it's difficult, and to create something that's authentically yours. The lighthouse beam swept across the darkening water, a steady reminder that even after the darkest night, dawn eventually comes. Phoenix Flame wasn't just a company. It was proof that sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most powerful beginnings, and that was a legacy truly worth building. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.